not completely, but just so you don't get too much of the noise from the outside. Okay, we're going to be kicking off global software development today. Unfortunately, it's we can't run it the way it was originally planned. If you've been reading the course description, you will see that it will run with students from Tampere University of Technology in Finland. And they decided to pull out because they have been having problems having students. Sign up for it because it was not compulsory. It was an elective course for them, or it was an elective project that you choose this from many other projects, and they had a hard time having enough students, so they decided to pull out, which means that we won't be having a part of the team somewhere else like we have been having, which of course then creates some challenges in how we organize the course. So what we're going to be doing this year is a bit different from before, because instead of having you experiencing firsthand working in a distributed team, we will do a little bit split work. One side in the seminars, we will go through some of the research papers. So that way, this course is going to be a little bit more similar to what we have been having before. So we're going to have some research papers to go through that talks about some of the challenges in global software development. And then the project that you'll be working on is going to be an open source, which is also a global type of project. So we're working on open source software, which we have been doing last year as well for some of the teams last year. And to help out Dipti, she's all new to you. She joined us in August, and maybe say a little bit about the background.
I'm from field of software engineering. I basically work with process and software quality, but I have some background in global software development, and I have written few research papers related to global software development as well. I think that's all they need to know.
Yeah. So we're going to be supervising the projects. We'll come back to that a little bit later on, and together we try to pick out the papers that we think are more relevant and useful for you to read. When it comes to the project, then Simon and Marius are also here in around in the neighborhoods and may be able to help you out as well on that side. But let's go and have a view of the course. So expected learning outcome, we should still be able to reach the objectives of the course. Doing it a little bit different, as I said, than before. Say a little bit about what you need to do, a little bit about the grading, and the challenges you already mentioned, them, is that we won't be having global teams. So if you look at the course description, so we've been having two projects before. We had a library design project in which you got introduced to methodology and tools for software development. Then you had the integration project in which you were pushed to be more innovative and work on more complex technologies. And the third project here, the idea is to focus on working in distributed teams, trying to, because what we're seeing in the software industry is that projects tend to be over different locations. You have maybe having a development team in Eastern Europe or in Asia, and all of that needs to be managed. So the idea here is to focus on that. Now, the fourth project you're going to be working on is the advanced project work. And advanced project work won't be starting until the middle of the semester, because what we wanted to do there is to do a small research type of project. And we will likely to do the specialization courses and the research project planning, get started there before you do the advanced project work. But this one has to focus on working in the global projects. And have you worked on global projects?
Kind of. A bit.
Where the team has been distributed?
It was some open source thing that I contributed to. So.
Right.
Yeah, a couple of open source projects that I was contributing to, and I'm kind of working in a company in Ukraine remotely, so it's also distributed, I would say.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, the whole global, the term global can mean several things. And, but what we'll talk about, a little bit about the global teamwork, and especially the communication and product management side of it. So we have already identified a couple of papers for you to read. And then we have the cultural aspects, and we'll come back to that a bit later on. Open source, which is going to be the project you're going to be working on, is going to be all open source, and Marge is going to say a little bit. You've probably heard about it, and at least two of you have some experience working in open source, maybe some others as well. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about the tools and methodologies, what might need to change, what kind of tools will be useful to have that you may not need in a local project, and some of the quality aspects. So as you can see from Time Edit, we're going to have seminars every other week, every odd week number, except for week 41, because in that week you have midterm exams in the specialization courses. But we will, like we've done before, for each of the seminars, we're going to do the Scrum demo or retrospective. So there will be project presentations, and as a new this year, we will also go through some of the research results. And these two will be your responsibility. So we will give you the papers to prepare and make the presentations like we have been doing before. The project work will then be to contribute to open source software. The objective should be to develop not just not just a kind of quick and dirty implementation, but it should be so that it could go straight into production. It could be a feature that would be adopted and accepted by the open source community. So, which means, as we talked about before, which means that testing, adhering to guidelines and standards will be necessary and will be required. Kitty and myself will be mentors or supervisors, advisors, whatever you call it, because there will be two project teams. So they will be bigger than what you had before. So it will be a team of 6 and a team of 7 is what I put together. Come back to these details later on as well. So what you need to organize is that you need to choose a name for your team. I currently just put up Team A, Team B. Have any of you been going to the wiki? No. You have in the wiki. Yeah. So we've been putting up some information there. I'm just going to go through it a little bit later on so you get a feeling for what's there. And then, as you've been doing before, you need to assign the roles to the team. Again, the methodology should be the one we've been using, the Agile. So you need a Scrum Master, you may need some of the other roles. And you should agree on when to have the daily Scrum meetings. This was more of an issue, of course, if the team was distributed. Now it's a bit easier for you to meet, but still this is an important thing to decide on. And as we will come back to, you need to see how you can contribute to the open source project. The project that we've chosen is the Moodle. Anyone you know Moodle? It's an LMS. Some of you may have been using it. Moodle is an LMS, which is an open source project. And as you can see, as you will see, there are a number of features that are being suggested. There is ongoing development work, there is tasks. So the first thing for you guys to do in the next 2 weeks would be to go into Moodle, their website, and see what's going on, see what you can contribute. And if you're having problems finding something, then you should just tell us as soon as you can, and then we'll suggest a separate module, because Moodle is such that you can have new features and modules on top of that. So we just add a new module, and you can work with that one. As I said, each of the teams will have a mentor or an advisor, but it's up to you to include and involve the mentor. One piece of advice, though, is that in this project, as well as on the other project courses, we do once in a while see that there are issues. Maybe there is a team member who's not contributing, something's happening. Try to raise these issues early on. The sooner you raise any issues, the more freedom we have to solve them. So don't wait till someone is towards the end of the course and you find that someone hasn't contributed as much as you agreed, or isn't sharing, or whatever. Then it's really late for us to do anything. So be in touch with myself as soon as you can. And it's your responsibility to make sure that you know what the open source community is expecting, what the guidelines are, what the rules are, standards, and make sure that you comply with these. So let's. So this is the global software development wiki. You remember it from the Confluence page? That's where we have the integration project in applied computer science for as well. General course information. If you go there, that's where we keep information about the general information, a little bit of introduction, a little bit about what we will be focused on when we grade this. And here we have the seminars. If you go to the seminars page, you'll find for each of the seminars the agenda, the outline. And we're going to put up lecture notes, recordings, whatever material we have once the seminar is over. And for next seminar, we already put up the papers that we will want to have you present. And now there will be 2 teams, and we're going to assign papers to each of the teams. So it's a good idea that you have 2 papers in the team, so you distribute the work how you want it. But it's a good idea that you discuss the papers internally, because it's not just about lecturing, it's about learning from it and discussing. So it will be good which each of the teams will go in and try to analyze what are the consequences, what should the impact be on your projects, and if you had a part of the team somewhere else, how would you do things differently? And for next time, we'll have a couple of papers in project management, and a couple of papers going on to risk management. For those who haven't been visiting here, so if we go to projects and teams, you see here the project proposals would be Moodle, and there is some recommendation guidelines what you should do here in terms of getting into Moodle and look at potential projects. So it's a good idea. So the first 2 weeks there's nothing for you to develop. The first 2 weeks will be to get set, to get the team organized, choose the projects, get in touch with the supervisors, and get the tools needed. So maybe you would like to have a build master, someone who knows the tools very well and can help the others in setting up, so that you can compile and you can get pull down the latest source code and build the whole system and integrate your own parts into it. The teams would be these. What I did there is to try to split the integration project teams so that you are working. So if you were working together in integration project, you may not be working together in this project. And I will be the supervisor for team A. And again, you should find better names than A and B. and Dipti will be the one for team B. I've just been assuming that everybody I have on my list will participate. If there are dropouts, we may need to rearrange the teams during these first 2 weeks. Might be that there are some changes this year. Some of these names won't be actually studying or signing up for the course this year. I think that is pretty much what's here. So as I said, yeah, and go back to project teams. Project teams. So these are the two. Team A, Team B are the two pages that I think you should keep as the root for whatever you would like to put out. Because I will, as I said before, you should have a little bit of a documentation, because as when the team is local, you will still want to keep decisions, meeting records, design decisions, some whatever the whole team need access to. But when it's distributed, it's even more important that the whole team can share information, share knowledge, and it's a good idea that they put it here so that we can keep an eye on it, and you also know where it is. So consider A and B as kind of the root for your project pages, for your tree, or for your own wiki. So you can put it there. We know, and we can look at what you have, and we can bug you, push you a little bit if you don't think there is enough documentation there. Because again, consider, even though you don't have members that are somewhere else, do consider the way you work should also work very well if part of the teams would be distributed, would be somewhere else. So try to think of ways to make sure that it would be possible for a half of the team to be somewhere else, so it would work the way you work, would also work for such a setup. I think that should be pretty much what you need to know from the wiki. But just go to the wiki and there you find information, and you should about the seminars we will continue to, of course, keep on adding papers and add references to the literature and to whatever we produce, whatever we find useful. And if you find resources, if you find anything that you think it would be useful, then you just add it to your team page, or if it's something that's useful for all, you can just add it. Because as you remember, the Confluence is open. So we just assume that you aren't ruining anything, but if you think some information, something you find would be useful to the rest of the team, other teams, and us, then you just add it to the wiki. It should be kind of a dynamic and democratic process for adding stuff here. This is pass or fail, so there isn't an A to F scale here. If you pass or you fail. And to pass, there are two steps here. First, the team as such need to pass, and then you individually need to pass as well. But for a team to pass, you need to produce some features that are tested or developed successfully and tested, so that you are actually delivering something, contributing to the open source project. And you need some documentation. As we talked about before, in an agile, it's not like traditional, very documentation heavy, but you need to document some key architectural decisions. You need to have some user stories. Some level of documentation is necessary so that the whole team, whether they are here or somewhere else, can have this shared understanding, shared picture of the project and what they're doing. You need, every time we meet, we're going to go through the retrospectives, and it should be, each team should keep a record of the retrospectives, what they learned. And in this case, you would like to, for each round, you would like to reflect on the way you've been working. Would that work if the team had been global, because the focus here is on the global aspect. So you should, every time you do the retrospective, you should also think about, is there anything we do that wouldn't work if parts of the team would be somewhere else, in a different time zone, or just happen to be in a different place. And as we had before, you need to have that chapter where you reflect on process and product. And in this case, the product is open source, so that has a global aspect. And the process, you should reflect on whether that way of working, that would fit into for a distributed or a global team. And you need to, every time we meet, you should be demoing what you have developed. Not next time, because next time you haven't started developing yet. The first 2 weeks is for you to set up the system, is to pull out the project you want to work on, the features you would choose to work on. And then, but from there on, then every time we meet, you should have a demo and a retrospective, as we've been having before in the library science project and integration project. So in addition to the team meeting these criteria, then each member must also be active and must also develop, contribute. And number one, it's up to you how you would like to present papers. If you have one presenter for each of the papers, or if you co-present. But what we require, and I can only keep notes, is that throughout the course of the whole semester, everybody should take a responsibility in presenting papers. So it's not that you have one presenter doing all the presentations and preparing for the paper. So everybody should contribute to that. And everyone also needs to document some active project participation, contributing to the process, both in development and in the documentation. So we'll keep eyes on seeing who is contributing on the wiki, who is contributing on Jira for the software that you develop. And when you have Scrum demos, every time you meet, everybody should be over throughout. I mean, not every time, but throughout the whole semester, everybody needs to be active and have participation, a real participation in the project. And we expect everyone to be able to contribute as much as is expected for 10 credits. So 10 credits is 1/6 of a full year, which means 1/6 of about 1,800 hours, or about 300 hours. But less than 300 hours is what you should, each one should be into this. And I don't know, did you start doing that in the previous project? Start recording how much time each one of you spent? Continue to do that. That's the best way. I mean, for one, it's the best way to document what you contributed, because each one needs to demo what they contributed, both actual pieces and time. But also, it's the best way for you to be better at estimating your own efforts in your own work, is to know how much you produce typically. Yeah, the course wiki, we already looked at it. And as I said, under these two Team A, Team B pages, you can store whatever you have. And it will be good if you there point to any other places where you keep information. So it will be possible for all of us involved to see, get a complete picture of what you're doing. A link to, if you use some Git repos yourself, if you have some other, if you don't want to use the wiki, but you have some other tools that you use, just make sure that everything is linked in. So this is kind of the portal to your whole project, so you can find everything from there. Any questions? Comments? Yeah, question.
Like you said that in the first project you had in the master, right? I think applied computer science project.
Yeah.
You said that we were to learn the tools, right?
Yeah.
And it was it was to be built on the further for the future projects, right? So I'm kind of sitting here right now and having looked at some of the assignments. kind of feeling a bit uneasy because I don't really know the tools that are being used in this development. So I'd have to actually learn all the tools before being able to populate.
Yeah, that's right. So the tools I was talking about were the project management tools. That would be Git, Jira, Confluence, I mean the management tools. But yeah, you're actually right. When it comes to development tools, that's something you need to factor in. And that is often the case. I mean, you probably saw that already at like a design project, in the duration project, and now this project. When you get to start a new project, in many cases you need to start using some new environments, new tools. So that is to be included in the estimation, in the planning, in the whole preparation for getting in there. So yeah, absolutely you need to, and that's why if anyone knows on the team, knows the tools pretty well, it might be an idea to have them as a build masters or someone who can support the rest of the team in the tools and using the development tools. Absolutely, yeah. So I don't know, uneasy. I mean, as professionals, that's typically what happens. When you have a new customer, a new project, you may need to revise your tool stack, or what you know that. So it's not necessarily the most efficient for you, but that might be what the customer wants or what the company has decided. So you may not have much of a choice there. So I mean, you are now towards the final year of the master. So getting onto a new tool stack is, when it comes to development, is something that you should know how to deal with. And it's going to take some time. And there are things you're going to be fighting for some time. But eventually, it's something that you've been doing several times before, so you know pretty much what to expect. That's reality also in the real world projects. Other questions? Comments? Because what I was thinking, let's see. So if you go here to the today's seminar, general course information, seminar number 1. To get us started a little bit, we have run this course a few times already, and we wrote a paper together with the Temple University professors. I wrote a paper, I guess that was last year, that has been published, that summarizes some of the experiences. And the paper is there, and you can read it and look at what we experienced. But after that, we have had another round of this global software development course, and I've summarized some of those experiences. This is not the most in-depth. Let's see, this in-depth study of the field, but it gives you a little bit of this, a little bit of the experiences that we have had, a little bit of the setting, what to expect in the global software development environment. And we're going to have more in-depth papers. So this is what I've been saying here, what our experiences are. You'll find more detail and more empirical data to support some of these observations that we're doing. So, background. We've been having you won't be global, but the matter of fact is that so have only very few of the other teams. So through our history, in 3 years, we have had only 2 projects that have truly been global, and the others will have to learn from what one of the project teams were experiencing. So in 2013, we had a global team, and with 2 students in Finland and 3 in Norway. They never met physically. They couldn't agree on the communication tools because one on the team, he refused to install Skype on his machine. So they weren't able to communicate very well. They tried to use some IRCs and some other tools, but it didn't work very well. They did have local Scrum Masters. So both in Finland and here, there was one student who kind of organized and kind of made sure that at least on each of the sides, the teams were running okay. And they, of course, run into serious problems. Number one, they didn't know each other, and the way they split the work was try to have minimal interaction. So one team was working with a client, one was working on a server. But if you have one client team and one server team, and the one doesn't deliver, how do you test the other part? So they had some serious issues, and they were quite upset. Luckily, there were local Scrum Masters, because then these two could raise the issues with the local mentors, and we had meetings in which we had both the supervisors at the two locations and all the students, and try to find ways to work around and solve these issues. But some of the issues were really hard to solve, because these are communication issues, and if you don't agree on good communication tools, it's hard to communicate with someone you don't know. They aren't there, you don't know them, and you don't have a nice tool for communicating. So based on this, we took some actions last year. So for one, we sponsored the students, Norwegian students, go to Helsinki to actually meet the Finnish students, and they had a good day's meeting and a dinner, and got to learn each other, not just what their strengths were in terms of as programmers and developers, but also personalities, and knowing a little bit more. They actually were able to do 2 Scrum meetings per week, though it took quite some efforts to organize it. They were able to, and they found that very useful. They also had the local Scrum Masters. Also in that case, one who was locally trying to organize and make sure that the team locally would function. They found the experience that it was sometimes when someone was having a problem, it would be hard to remotely solve the problem. So the expertise can be here, and students in Finland had the problem. So how do you have these two sit together and solve the problems? So having shared screens, being able to sit together and solve a problem was a bit of a challenge. They didn't do code review across sites, which resulted in the software they developed didn't run at the customer side when they handled the customer. And because somehow the setup here that students developed here wasn't really the setup that was in Finland, so the software ran here but not in Finland. So code review and also testing you need to think about that to make sure that there aren't local variations that cause the software not to run. So they weren't able to deliver the product really well. Oh, it worked here, but it didn't work in Finland. So we had the ability to observe the one global team with the local teams at the same time. And what we found is that the global or distributed teams, they needed to spend more time to learn the tools and techniques. As I was saying, it was harder to help, and the consequences of divide and conquer was harder because the coordination, I mean, divide and conquer is easy, but when you try to coordinate, when you try to combine and merge the pieces, it was much harder. So they need to spend more time to coordinate and to integrate pieces. And project management and coordination was more demanding. They needed to put in more time for the planning, or they had more problems because of lack of good plans. And it was much harder to coordinate activities. It takes more efforts, you need more time. And as I said, one thing they decided, both teams did, was to have at least some local Scrum Masters that could talk to each other. When things fail, then the 2 Scrum Masters or 2 local Scrum Master or facilitators could talk to each other and try to figure out. And the one thing that you also should think about when you do the role assignments, which work very well in these 2 teams, is that the ones that chose as the local Scrum Masters were the more, should I say, socially intelligent, or at least they were good at working with people skills. They had good people skills, not necessarily the best technology or where the best developers necessarily or the strongest programmers, but these had the people skills. They could understand what the problems were, and they could communicate, and they could solve problems. So people skills might be something that you think of when you try to have somebody in the role of coordinating, the role of communicating. Number one problem is communication. That's the way to synchronize. That's the way to coordinate. The first team never met physically, and they had lots of issues. The second team did ship their bodies to Finland so that they could actually meet physically, and they considered that very valuable. They said afterwards it was much easier to communicate, even though they never met again. They just communicated using Skype and all these other tools. It was much easier when they knew the person behind the face, when they knew each other, even though they just spent the day more or less together. And they have been, they decided to not just focus on, as I said, on the programming task, not only focusing on what to deliver, but they try to learn each other's strengths and weaknesses, motivation, wishes, and choosing a media-rich communication tool that allows you to see the one you talk to, allow you to share a screen, tend to be quite valuable. So I know some of the open source is the IRC, and you just send messages on forums. That's the way to communicate. But if you have a team that's working much more closer together, it adds value to have a rich communication tool. And cultural differences was highlighted as important. And interesting thing here is that all the teams, I mean, we've had international students, and Finland is also international students. So the teams are, even local teams are kind of multicultural. But one thing you shouldn't neglect is that culture becomes kind of shared culture. Now you have different levels of multicultural. So one is having on the team people with different background. Now, if you have a team that resides in 2 or more locations, there will be subcultures on each of these locations. You also need to think about the cultures, not just because people are different, but also because they are in a different environment. So the students in Finland, they had a different common culture in Finland compared to the culture that our students had, which also, so even though both were multicultural, it wasn't like cultural problems were much easier to solve. No, because you had the Finnish culture that all the teams in Finland would share, and they have this Yevi culture that our teams would share because you work together and you gradually adapt. But now these two cultures were different. So there were that's also so the local teams, they didn't find culture, even though they're multicultural, didn't find as an issue because you know each other. You've been working together before and you know each other. But now once you're working with another team, even though they come from the same countries as you come from, they will have developed their special culture because of where the teams are residing. So my conclusion, and I guess that's also probably what you find in the research, is that it's not like a global team all of a sudden has all these new problems, new challenges that none of the other teams have. No, it's the same problems. So it's having communication problems, coordination problems, the cultural problems. These are all the same type of problems that local teams have. Though, what you need to consider is that it's much harder to solve these problems when a team is distributed and it might result in different cultures and different time zones. It's much harder, needs more effort, and needs to be more focused on solving them. And number two, if you don't solve them, the consequences can be much worse than if you are local, because it's easy to work around, and the consequences may not be as bad in the local team compared to a global team. So the problems you're going to see from the research that we come up, the problems are known as project management problems, as general problems. But it's much more challenging to deal with them in a distributed team, and the consequences can be much worse, much harder for the project and for the team. I think that is okay. Yeah. Messages to take home. It is worth spending time to get to know each other. Now you know each other, but you may not have worked that closely in this team setup, so it may still make sense to start to learn each other. And as I said, not just learning about your professional strengths and weaknesses, but we happen to be one complete human being, each one of us. So our personal interest and what we do outside of the job and what other factors form us would also be important to get to know. The more you know each other, the easier you will have in communicating and sharing information. And spend time on defining roles and responsibilities and try to find robust solutions. What I mean by that is that, like the one team that had the server in Gjøvik and the client in Tempora, if the server team doesn't deliver, what can the client team do? So it might be an idea to think about the ways in which you aren't so
tightly coupled.
Yeah, too decoupled. So a little bit of a robustness, and that means redundancy typically. And you need to spend time on project management, because otherwise you have a project that can easily get out of control. Communication tools, and I guess in your team, even though you are local, you may find that some team members will be out traveling, or there are sometimes you would like to meet but someone can't participate. So find ways to communicate, to share decisions, to share the basis, to make sure that the team, everybody on the team pretty much knows what's going on. Keep in touch regularly. And as I was saying about the group problems, whenever you see something that may develop, address it early on so that you have more freedom to solve it. And if you wait for too long, it's sometimes hard to solve some of these problems. I think that was it. Question?
Can you highlight some of the cultural differences that was between here and Finland, and where one of those, how big of an issue were they in particular?
Well, the biggest in both projects, the biggest cultural difference is that Norwegian students are kind of relaxed when it comes to deadlines and deliverables. So they promise that this is what you're going to deliver, but they're ready to deliver. In Finland, the culture is such that you work hard and you make sure that what you promise to deliver, you deliver it. And as an example, the final project, the students had a customer, and in Finland, if you promise the customer a product, you make sure that it's delivered and it's working. Now, it wasn't working by the time the course was done here, so students came to me and said, do we have to deliver to the customer? And I said, well, I can force you because the course is over, so I can force you, but I would strongly urge you to think about your professional ethics here. As a professional, you should, and they decided not to. Because, I mean, it was holiday and they were going out and they were done with their exams and had their grades and they didn't care. That culture, that attitude is very different. In Finland, they promise to the customer, we deliver. It's going to take what it needs to be. But the Norwegian students, okay, we got our grades, so you're happy. That's one of the big differences. Which turned out to be, of course, means that you have different ambition levels. So in Finland, the first project on the client and server, the client, they were working very hard to get a very good functional client, lots of features, more than what the customer strictly asked for. Well, the Norwegian team, they were, okay, no, it didn't work, oh, sorry, that guy is sick, oh, sorry, that guy. So they never got to work. So there are different type of attitudes. So it's not like they spoke different languages or different religions, but it's more on the way what had priority in terms of deliverable, in terms of work ethics, or whatever you want.
And attitudes.
Attitudes, definitely, yes. Should we have a short break? And then Marius comes back and talk a little bit about open source and introduce you and set you towards the project. Yeah, 10 minutes, fine.